Okay, so the question says 4x squared minus x minus 5 equals 0. So I'd like you to, if you'd like to, pause the video and try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to pause the video and try this, but if not, that's okay. This is a quadratic equation here, and you could solve it either using a formula or you could solve it by factoring. And so in this case, I'm going to show you how to do it by factoring. And I think that's usually going to be the faster way to do it, but it can be a little bit trickier. The solution of the quadratic equation formula, I have other videos on my channel showing how to do that, but we're going to focus on factoring because I think a lot of people are interested more so in the factoring. But I'll try to remember to put a link down below to how to do it with the equation too, if you'd like to get some practice with that as well. So to factor, the first thing you want to do here is take the first number that's in front of the x squared and the last number, which here is 5, but we have to consider this sign in front of it, right? And you want to multiply them together. So you do 4 times 5, and you have to consider the sign here, so it's really 4 times negative 5. All right, so 4 times negative 5, again, I took the first number in front of the x squared, I multiplied it by the last number, took the sign into consideration, and we see that that's negative 20. All right, so let me put a big M here and I'll explain why. All right, so I'm putting this M here, and that's because we want to now find we want to find a pair of numbers that are going to multiply together to be negative 20. That's why I put this M here. The M stands for multiplication. Again, we need to find a pair of numbers, so 2 numbers that are going to multiply together to be negative 20. But here's the catch. We have to also look at this term in the middle, the x term here, and particularly the number in front of the x. And we don't see a number in front of the x, so we just assume it's 1. We take the sign into consideration, and it's negative 1. So I'm going to put an A here, and the A stands for addition. So we need to find a pair of numbers, 2 numbers that are going to multiply together to be negative 20, but they have to add together to be negative 1. All right, so that's why you're free to do this or not to do this. Oops. When you take your test, if you want to write this out on scratch paper or not, it's up to you. But just remember, what we did, again, we found that we need 2 numbers that will multiply together to be negative 20, but those same 2 numbers have to add up to be negative 1. So a good way to start if you're not sure how to proceed is to just think of numbers that will multiply together to give you negative 20. So the obvious one, or hopefully it's obvious, would be maybe negative 2 and 10. Negative 2 and 10 will multiply together to be negative 20. You could also alternatively do it like this. You could say, well, negative 2 times 10 is negative 20, but also positive 2 times negative 10 is also negative 20. But the problem we have with this pair is that if you add them up, right, if you try to do 2 plus negative 10, in other words, you can think of it as 2 minus 10, however you want to think of it, we add these 2 numbers up, that's going to give us minus 8, all right, which is not negative 1. Same with this pair here. If we try to add them up, we've got negative 2 plus 10, that gives me positive 8, and we need them to add up to be negative 1. So neither of these pairs are going to help us here. So let's keep thinking of things that will multiply together to give us negative 20. So what about negative 4 and 5? Negative 4 and 5. They will definitely multiply together to be negative 20, but let's try to add them up. So if you do negative 4 plus 5, it's really the same as 5 minus 4, that's going to be positive 1. So whenever this happens, whenever you get the answer but it's the wrong sign, consider just flipping it around here. So instead of negative 4 and 5, let's try positive 4 and negative 5. All right, so we found a pair that's going to add up to give us 1. So now we're going to just try to do it the other way around. We're going to try to switch the sign. Instead of negative 4 and 5, let's try it with 4 and negative 5. See if that gives us minus 1, and actually it does. 4 plus negative 5. In other words, you can think of it also as 4 minus 5, however you want to think about it, gives us negative 1. So we now have a winner here. We found 2 numbers that multiply together to be negative 20, and they add up to be negative 1. So now here's what we have to do. We're going to have to do x plus 4, and we have to look now and we have to see that, hey, there is 4 in front of the x squared. So this number here, this 4, I have to divide it by 4. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to set this equal to 0. Now we have to do the same thing with the negative 5 here. So we set up our pair here. It's going to be x. Now instead of plus 5, it's going to be minus 5, and that's also going to have to be divided by 4 as well. So we take 5, divide that by 4 as well, because there's 4 in front of the x squared. All right, so luckily 4 divided by 4 is just 1. So this is going to simplify life, because we now are going to be left with, this is going to be, if I rewrote it, it would be x plus 1. And to solve that for x, I have to get the x by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. Since it's x plus 1, I can subtract 1 from both sides of the equation. Plus 1 minus 1 cancels out. I'm left with x equals negative 1. One value for x is going to be x equals negative 1. And now we have to go down to this pair here, and we have to set this equal to 0. And it's really the same kind of process here. We've got x minus 5 over 4, and we want to get x by itself, so I have to do the opposite operation here, which is addition. So if I have x minus 5 over 4, and if I add 5 over 4 to this side, look what's going to happen. I have x minus 5 over 4, I add 5 over 4, they cancel out. And I have to also do it to this side, because whatever you do to one side, you also have to do to the other. So I have to add 5 over 4 on this side. 0 plus 5 over 4 is just 0. Or I'm sorry, it's just 5 over 4. So I'm left with x equals 5 over 4. So here we have our solution, and hopefully you got A as the right answer. Question. A painter uses the expression 35H plus 30C to determine how much he charges a customer for a job that takes H hours and C cans of paint. His last job required 3 cans of paint and took 15 hours to complete. How much did the painter charge? So you can pause the video, try this out, and then as always, we'll go over it. Okay, so let's go over this question here. And so basically, they're telling us here that the job took 15 hours to complete. So for H, in place of H, I'm going to put a 15 in this formula right here. And it tells us that the job required 3 cans of paint. So I'm going to just substitute this number 3 in the formula in place of C. So we're going to have 35 times 15 plus 30 times 3. Now once you have this set up, you can put this in your calculator as I'm about to do. So 35 times 15 plus 30 times 3, and I get 615, so C here is the correct answer. So this next question says points J, K, and L are plotted on a coordinate grid. So here's our grid over here. And the actual question itself is, what are the coordinates of the points on the coordinate grid? Now, to fit as much of this on the screen as possible and to try to make the graph as big as possible, I had to put the answers right up here above the question. So here are multiple choice answers. So let's have you pause the video. As always, we'll have you try this out. And then if you get stuck, don't worry, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so this is a really important skill to have mastered for the GED test. They all really are, but I would say this one in particular does. Something like this comes up a lot. It's no guarantee. The tests are randomized, so no one knows exactly which questions you'll get, but this skill is important to have down. And so what we have to understand, first of all, is that we've got a coordinate grid. I call it a graph, but whatever you want to call it, a graph, coordinate grid. And we've got a y-axis and an x-axis. So right now I am putting a box around the y-axis. So the up and down part, or the vertical part, this arrow here that goes up and down, vertical, however you want to think about it, that is what we call the y-axis. Now, the x-axis, which they show an x right here, that goes left and right, or you could think of it as going horizontal, whatever is easier for you to remember. But the x-axis is what's down here, going left to right. And that's really the most basic thing to understand, first of all, to get us started with the coordinate grid here. But let's pick out something here. Let's pick out -4 and 1. So let's just look at J here. So let's look at this pair, -4 and 1, because that appears in B, C, and D here. What I want you to see is that this is what we call a coordinate pair. That's what I call it, at least. That's usually what it's called. Some people might call it something a little different, but it's usually called a coordinate pair, and the first letter, the first number in a coordinate pair is always corresponding to an x coordinate. So the first number, again, it always corresponds to an x value. Whereas the second number in any coordinate pair is always going to correspond to a y value. In other words, the first number in the pair, -4, that's going to be something on our x-axis. The second number in the pair is always a y, so that's going to correspond to something on our vertical or y-axis. All right. So let's go to J and let's check this out and let's see what happens here. So looking at J here, let's figure out what is the x coordinate for J here. So I'll start at the dot, and I want to just, you can do this, you probably can't obviously write on the screen. Well, I shouldn't say probably, you can't write on the screen on your test, but in your head, you would start here and you would go all the way down until you hit the x-axis. What number am I hitting right here? Well, I'm hitting -4. So the x, so for point J, the x value in the coordinate pair is going to be -4. So I can really rule out A because we know that 1 is not going to be the x coordinate. But let me show you, let's confirm the y coordinate here. So again, we start at point J. To find the y coordinate of the pair, I would just go, let's trace directly over here until we hit the y-axis. and I go straight over, and look, I hit the y-axis at 1. So the coordinates for j are -4 and 1. All right, so we've ruled out answer choice A. So let me clear that out here. So A is done. Now let's check K. So let me go right to K on the graph here. So for K here, remember, we want to, let me write out K here. So we want to always, always, always start with the x coordinate, all right? Because in the pair, you have to write the x first. And I recommend labeling it too. If you're writing this, you know, you're on your test, if you're writing this out on your scratch paper or whiteboard or digital whiteboard, whatever your case happens to be when you take the test. I mean, a lot of people don't like to take time to write out labels like this. Perfectly up to you, but you know, I think it's helpful if it helps you get the question right. But for K, let's start with our x value. So we start at this dot here, and we're going to trace down until we hit our x-axis, and bam, hit the x-axis right here. What number does it correspond to? Well, it corresponds to 0. So for K, the x value is 0. Now, what about y? Well, if we start here for y, and we want to trace until we hit the y-axis, and hopefully you see, hey, there's nowhere to go. The dot is already on this arrow here, right? The dot is already on the y-axis, so, and the dot is at 3, so this is just going to be 3. So for K, our coordinate pair is 0 and 3. All right, 0 and 3. So basically, we now can rule out, A is really ruled out now because you can't have a 3 in the x-axis for K, or in the x-coordinate for K now, but we also can take D out. So just by checking J and K, you're already down to a 50-50. So if you had to guess on this and you didn't have time to figure out L for some reason, you know, it's a coin flip, you're down to a 50-50. Definitely a winning strategy on your test. I mean, you got to play the odds. If you ever, on any question on the test, if you're stuck and you can't get it right, always try to eliminate answers, even if you just eliminate 1 out of the 4. It's like you got to do everything you can to put the odds in your favor. I mean, now the more you study, obviously you don't want to rely on odds, you want to rely on skill and knowledge, but let's be real here, you know, sometimes when you got to guess, you have to guess, and you want to try to eliminate everything you can. It's just going to help improve your odds. And for L here, let's start with L. So again, let's figure out L, and that's going to tell us if the answer is B or C. So what number is going to go here? Is this going to be the x-coordinate or the y-coordinate? Well, hopefully you remember from just a few seconds ago that the x-coordinate is always written first in the pair, and the y is written second. So if I go and find the L, I find this dot right now, let's check the x-coordinate. Let's see what that is. So I start at the dot, and you'll want to do this mentally, obviously. You won't be able to write on the screen, like I said, but if we go directly up, bam, we hit the x-axis and right at 3. So the x-coordinate here is going to be 3. And let's just check the y just for fun. So if I start at this dot and I just want to go towards the y-axis, or I want to keep going until I hit the y-axis, and I hit it right at -2, so then the y is -2. And just like that, we figured out that B is the right answer. So hopefully you understand this. You know, more importantly than just knowing that B is the right answer, I want you to really understand how to look at a point. Like, I'm not going to make you do this right now, but if I picked a dot right here, and if I put this dot right here and I told you, well, what are the coordinates for this? Hopefully you would know that it's -5 and 5. You know, if I put a dot right here, hopefully you would be able to figure out that this is going to be on the x-axis, it's going to be 5 and -5. I'm just picking these at random. I don't expect you to do this right now, but I'm just saying, you know, where I put the dot, anywhere, whether it's here or here, you know, you should feel comfortable telling me if I asked you, what are the points, what are the coordinates of this point on the graph? You should feel comfortable being able to get the right answer. All right, and if not, then, you know, this is a skill you'll want to put some extra practice in. So let's move on to the next question. Good work so far. Okay, so the next question says, what is the slope of the line represented by the equation 3x plus 4y equals 8? You can pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically, to do a question like this, when it comes to slope questions, there's a few things you have to know. Everything about slope is not necessarily relevant to getting this right, so I'm just going to tell you how to get this question right. But there's a few other things to know about slope for the test as well, which I've covered in other videos. But one of the main most important things is you have to know this formula. It's y equals mx plus b. And basically, this is your guide to getting this question right. Knowing this formula here, y equals mx plus b. And we have to take this equation that we're given here and we have to rearrange it to get it in this form so that it's, instead of 3x plus 4y equals 8, it's got to be in the form of y equals mx plus b. So let's first identify what corresponds with what things in this equation that we're given correspond to this formula. All right, so the number in front of the x, or in this case we call it the m, that is actually what the slope is, okay? So in this formula here, this b is going to be the y-intercept, which means when you've got a graph here, my graph is crooked, but that's okay. And let's say we had a line on the graph, all right, and we already went over just a little bit ago that the y-axis is the axis that goes up and down, the x-axis goes this way, and for a line on a graph, okay, there is a y-intercept, and the y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis here. And the way you would find that is, well, number one, you can look at the graph, or what you would do is you plug a 0 in for x, and whatever this b happens to be, that is the y-intercept. That's where the graph is going to cross the y-axis. Okay, and so basically, the b here in this is the y-intercept. Okay, so let me just write y-intercept. And this is important to know, not just for this question, but for the whole test. So I'm just going to put y-intercept for other questions and stuff on the test too. So this is your y-intercept. Y-int, I'm going to call that. And this term right here, this m, this is the slope. And so you might just say, well, if I look down at the equation, I see it's 3x. Well, isn't the 3, doesn't that just mean 3 is the slope? And no, because we have to first rearrange the equation so that it's y equals mx plus b. We have to take this equation and rearrange it again so it's y equals mx plus b, and then we look at the m. And we already know that this 3x here, this is going to be a key component of this. But we have the term with the x and the term with the y on the same side of the equal sign, so that's no good, right? Because here we've got y on one side of the equal sign, here we've got mx on the other. So let's start off here, let's do this. So why don't we start by, let's subtract 3x from both sides of the equation here, all right? And I have positive 3x here, so if I subtract 3x, this will cancel out, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So let me rewrite this down here, and I rewrite it as 4y, right? So I have 4y equals, and now I'll have minus 3x and plus 8. Now I could have also wrote it, just left it as 8 minus 3x, but then it's not going to be in the right order, so I'm going to write it as 4y equals minus 3x plus 8, okay? And we're still not in the right form. We don't have y equals mx plus b yet. We have 4y equals, well, mx plus b. So we need to get rid of this 4. And since it's 4 times y, what we have to do is divide by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. The 4's are going to cancel out. But whatever you do to one side, you have to also do it to the other. So I have to divide by 4 on this side. And now, without doing any further math, we can already see that the slope is going to be negative 3 over 4. Which would be negative sine 3 over 4, which would correspond to b here, all right? Now, technically, I suppose you could do this. You could say, well, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Negative 3x divided by 4, well, I'll just leave that. And you could rewrite the whole thing as y equals negative 3 over 4x plus 2. But there's really, again, the plus 2 has nothing to really do with the answer here. So technically now, if we wanted to find the y-intercept, what we would do is we put a 0 in for x, and we're just left with this positive 2. So that would tell us for this, it says, what is the slope of the line? Well, the slope of that line would be negative 3 over 4. The y-intercept, where that graph is going to cross the y-axis, would be positive 2. The question's not asking us to know that here, but future questions might. Not necessarily in the study guide, but on your test. So also know how to find the y-intercept, and hopefully this makes sense. This is an important thing to understand for the test here. If you're really struggling with this, I have other videos where I talk about slope more extensively on my channel here. It's luck of the draw which topics come up on your test, but this is a fairly common topic. I wouldn't be surprised if you got a question or two on slope, so just please make sure you understand how to do this, and if not, you can watch this again or watch my other videos where I talk about slope too. Hopefully that'll help it make sense for you. But good work sticking with the video so far. So the next question says, Chelsea designed beaded bracelets. The equation P equals 7 plus 0.05B can be used to find the price P of a bracelet that has B beads. What does the number 0.05 in the equation represent? A, the price of each bead, B, the price of each bracelet, C, the number of bracelets made, or D, the number of beads in a bracelet. So you can pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically here, what you need to understand here is that, and really for any math question, if you're ever having trouble, just look at what they're giving to you and take account of what's given to you first. So here, what are they giving us? They're telling us P, they're telling us that, this equation can be used to find the price P of a bracelet that has B beads. So P represents the price of each bracelet. So we can rule B out based off of that. Now, they also tell us that the bracelet has B beads. So what does that really mean? Well, whenever you see a letter in math, we call that letter a variable or an unknown. If we knew how many beads there were, we would just plug that number in place of this. So in other words, if we knew that there were 10 beads, instead of putting a B here, you would put 10 in. If you knew that it was 3 beads, you would have 3 in place of this B. If you knew it was 100, instead of writing a B, you would multiply 0.05 by 100. So B is a variable. It represents the number of beads, as we're told here. So we can rule out, let's see here, we can rule the number of bracelets made, the number of beads in a bracelet. So we can rule this out here. It's the number of beads, yeah. It's been a lot of recording, so sorry if I seem a little scatterbrained. D is the number of beads in a bracelet. All right, so again, like I said, if there's 10 beads, that's what B would represent. We can rule that out because 0.05 does not possibly represent B beads. So basically, we're left with C and A, and we're down to a 50-50 right now. So let's think about it this way too. Let's say that, and this would be a crazy example, this would never happen, but let's say that you went to a store and they're having sale of a lifetime and you can buy a candy bar for, let's say, 5 cents. So you could buy a candy bar for a nickel. So let's say that you go to the store, you want to buy a candy bar for yourself, and you have 2 friends, you want to buy 1 candy bar for each of them. So if you wanted to figure out the total cost, you would say, well, 1 candy bar costs 0.05 cents, because this is the sale of a lifetime on candy bars. I need to buy 3. Well, I would have to figure out how many nickels I need to bring. I would do 0.05 times 3. Now, let's say you wanted to buy 10 candy bars, and again, we're at, the sale of a lifetime store, 0.05 cents a candy bar. You want to buy 10 to figure out the cost, you would multiply by 10. So what I'm trying to say here is that, the B, it's the same thing. Instead of the number of candy bars, B here represents the number of beads, okay, in the bracelet. And so the 0.05 is telling you the price of each bead. All right, so the price is going to be the same for each bead. The thing that's going to change is going to be the number of beads in each bracelet, all right? In other words, the thing that's going to vary, or the variable, is the number of beads in each bracelet, but the cost is steady for each of them, or the price, in other words. So A is the correct answer here. Okay, the next question says, Kirsten walks up 6 flights of stairs to her office each morning as part of her exercise routine. She walks the first 3 flights, rests for 30 seconds, walks the next 2 flights at the same rate of speed as she walked the first 3 flights, rests again for 30 seconds, and then walks the last flight of stairs at the same rate. Which graph represents Kirsten walking up the stairs? So this is a really good test of your ability to kind of think critically and problem solve and look at graphs. So I'd like you, as always, to pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so there's actually a really quick hack here that you might not have seen, and if you did, then congratulations. If not, don't worry, that's what you're here to learn about. So we see that there's rest periods here, right? So basically, when she goes up 3 flights of stairs, she's going up, so we would expect there to be an increase in height, right? Which we see on the graph. But when she's resting, she's just standing there on a step, I suppose, that's how I picture it, and she's just standing there on a step, and she's resting, the height's not changing. So you would expect to see these flat portions in the graph, right? Because these flat portions here represent a period where there's no change in height, meaning she's not going up or down, there's no change in height. So if you look at A and C, we should be able to just take these out right off the bat, because what we see here is, if you look right here, okay, this line is going up. All right, so this represents an increase in the height, which is not what we should see on the graph, right? We should see an increase in time because she's just resting there for 30 seconds. So 30 seconds of time is going to pass, but we shouldn't see any up or down movements on the height or the vertical axis here. So we're right away down to B or D. Now, the real difference here is that we have to think about proportions here. Okay, so it says that the first thing she did was she walked 3 flights, all right? So her height change when she's going up 3 flights is this portion of the graph right here, from 0 to right about this line, all right? And it's the same with D down here. Okay, and then she rests for 30 seconds, so we see no change in height, but the time is increasing. And then we get to this part where she also goes up again, And it says what happens next in our little story here is Kristen then walks the next 2 flights at the same rate of speed as she walked the first 3 flights. So she goes up another 2 flights right here. Then she's going to rest again for 30 seconds, but then it says she walks the last flight of stairs at the same rate. So what you have to think about here is notice that this part of the graph, the line is just about as long as this line right here, which is just about the same length as this line up here. So it seems to me that these lines are representing that each time she walks up the stairs, she's going up the same height. And that's not the case, because remember, first she goes up 3 flights, then she walks up 2 flights, then it's just 1. So if you look down at D, you see, okay, so this is the height change as she goes up 3 steps. And then we see the line, then she rests for 30 seconds, and then she goes up another 2 flights, but it's only 2 flights. So it's not going to be quite as steep of a hill this time, right? It's not quite as big of a height change. And then the last thing she does, she walks up the last flight. So the last thing she does is she walks up 1 more flight of stairs, just 1 more. So we would expect that since there was 3 flights, then 2, and then 1, we wouldn't expect there to be quite as big of a height change with just 1. So that's why D is the correct answer here. Whereas B, it looks like every time she's walking up a flight of steps, whenever she's not resting, it looks like the height change is the same to me. But D is representative of the height change of 3 steps, 2 steps, and then 1. Okay, so the next question says, what is the equation of the line that has a slope of -7 and passes through the point 4, 8? A, x plus 7y equals 60. B, 7x plus y equals 36. C, x minus 7y equals -52. Or D, 7x minus y equals 20. You know the drill by now. Let's have you pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically, to get this question right, there's a formula that you have to use, and if you didn't know this formula, then that's okay. Let me show you how to use this. And so I'll explain this formula here. It's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And I'm going to explain what this formula means because it can seem a little confusing, but it's not impossible to learn how to do this. It's actually quite simple once you see it. So basically, what you have to understand is that this m right here, this m means the slope. All you would do is first know to use this formula. You have to recognize that it's an equation of a line question, and they tell us that the slope is -7. So all you do is we're going to take the -7 and we're going to rewrite the equation, and we're going to replace m with -7. It's the first thing you have to do. The second step is you have to look at the numbers in the parentheses here, the 4 and the 8. Now this 4, we're going to plug that in for x1, and the 8, we're going to plug that in for y1. So a common mistake here would be if you take the 4 and you remember that this has to go in for an x, but you think it's going in, instead of x1, you substitute it in for the x right here, okay? Or same with the 8, instead of putting 8 in for y1, you might put 8 in for just y, and so that'll get you the wrong answer, so you don't want to do that on the test. Remember, 4 goes in, the first number that's written in the pair, whatever it happens to be, I don't care if it's 99,000, the first number in the pair always goes in for x1. The second number in the pair goes in for y1, all right? And so if you're not sure what I mean when I say, well, the 4 goes in for x1, the 8 goes into y1, let me show you. So I'm now going to rewrite this equation. And so I leave the y like it is. Now, and I write y minus y1. Now, what goes into the equation for y1? Remember, we just said that it was 8. So I have y minus 8 equals... Now, instead of writing the m again, what am I going to write? Well, remember, it's -7. So y minus 8 equals -7 times x minus what? Remember, this x1, we take the 4 and we're going to put it into the equation for x1. So what I mean by that is we're going to rewrite the equation, and instead of writing x1, you just write the 4, all right? And so I'm going slow so we understand this, but really on your test when you write this out to figure the problem out, it's only going to, once you know how to do this, it shouldn't take more than 10, 20 seconds of time to do this, and that's going to help you get the question right, because you have to use this formula to get the question right. So now what we want to do here is we have some work to do, right? So we're going to have to take this -7x and we're going to do what's called distributing. And so basically we're going to do -7x times x. Then we're also going to take -7x and multiply it by -4 here. All right, we have to keep the signs into consideration here. All right, and so fortunately a negative times a negative is just going to give you a positive number. So let me rewrite this. So we still have our y minus 8. We haven't dealt with that yet, but we are now going to have -7x, all right, and we're also going to have Negative 7 times negative 4 is positive 28. So we now have plus 28. So we're almost done. And what we now have to do is we want to just get this y by itself on this side of the equation. So basically what we have to do is we're going to say, well, it's y minus 8, so I have to add 8. So whatever you do to one side, you also have to do it to the other side. All right, and so let me draw an arrow to show that I'm rewriting this, because now what we're left with is y equals negative 7x plus 36. Now, a little while ago we were talking about slope, and we said that you have to use this equation right here is the equation of the line. Y equals mx plus b. And that's exactly what we've just done here, right? We've just taken we knew the slope, we knew 2 points on the line, and we used this formula here, which is called the point slope formula. We did some math and we just found the equation of the line, which is given by this formula, y equals mx plus b. All right, so now you might be saying, well, how do I know why are the answer choices written like 7x plus y equals 36, blah, blah, blah. Why are the answer choices written like that? Well, for some reason they've rearranged this a little bit. They don't have it written in the actual equation of the line. So basically what you would do is you'd look at A, B, C, and D, and I can tell right away that this is going to be the answer because it's the only number that has the 36. But basically the way that they did this is if you look at all the equal signs and look at everything to the left of the equal sign, they have the numbers with x and y all on the left-hand side of the equal sign. No idea why on earth you would do that. I think that's kind of like a not really a good example of the concept of getting the equation of a line. But basically what you would have to see is that since they have the x and y's on both sides of the equation, all I could do is I could just move this 7x over to the left side of the equation. So it's minus 7x, I would have to do plus 7x. And whatever you do to one side, you'd have to also do to the other. So it would end up being y plus 7x equals 36, which is going to be answer choice B. All right, so basically you have to use this formula to get the answer right. We did all the math. We got all the way down to the final step. We found that the equation of the line is y equals negative 7x plus 36. And for some reason that blows my mind why you would set it up like this. They don't have their answer choices like written in the proper mathematical y equals mx plus b form. So really you would just have to, number one, the 36 is a giveaway, b is the answer right there. But you would just have to take this right here and then rearrange it so the y and the x terms are both on the left-hand side of the equation, which I did, and we got answer choice B. Okay, so the next question, what is the equation of the line that passes through the points negative 3, negative 2, and 1, 6? So I'll let you pause the video, try this one out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so let me give you the two formulas, first of all, that you need to use. And so if you were completely stumped on this and you weren't sure what to even do to even start this question, and it felt impossible, don't worry about it because I'm going to give you these two formulas. And if you didn't know to use these formulas, you probably couldn't get the right answer here. So if you'd like to, knowing that you have to use these formulas, you can pause the video and try again if you were completely stuck. Okay, so regardless, let's go over this. Hopefully you have had a chance to try this with or without the formulas. But this is very similar to what we were just doing. What is the equation of the line? And so equation of the line, you always just want to think of this formula here, right? Or the equation of the line is just y equals mx plus b. Okay, so this is what we're trying to figure out. We want to figure out what is y equals mx plus b. For the equation of the line that passes through the points negative 3, negative 2, and 1, 6. So this is similar to what we were doing earlier and in the last question, but this is a little bit harder now because now they haven't given us the slope. Basically, the first step that we have to do, we have to start with this formula right here. Formula number one, because this is going to help you get the slope. So it's m, which m stands for slope, equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So the first thing I want you to do is pick look at the first pair here. We're gonna make this x1 and we're gonna make this y1. And I'm telling you, like, labeling this really, really, really helps. And then the second pair, it's 1 and 6. I'm gonna make this, x2. I almost wrote y2. I'm gonna make this x2 and just pretend this looks more like an x than it really does, please, because my handwriting's not that great, as you probably have realized by now into the video, but this is x2, and then the 6, we're going to make that y2. All right, so the first number is always an x, the second number is always a y, and you could do it the other way if for some reason you could make this 1 x1, and you could make this 6 y1, you could make this negative 3 x2, and this negative 2 y2, but I think people just get confused when you do that. So if you get a question like this, just, the first pair, I would just make it x1, y1, and the second pair, just make it x2 and y2, all right? That's not the only way to do it, but this is really, I think, the easiest way to do it. I mean, math is hard. We don't want to make it any harder than it is, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at this formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and we're just going to take our y2, which is 6, and we're just going to plug it into the formula in place of y2. Okay, the same with our y1. Our y1 is -2. We're just going to put that in place of y1. All right, now same with the x2 and the x1. So my x2, again, I labeled it as 1. And that's why I think labeling it really helps, because it's easy to just see. You think, well, what's my x2? Well, just look, here's your x2, right? That's why I think labeling it helps. A lot of students I've worked with in person, they don't want to take the time to do that for some reason, but it's really, I think it's going to save you time. So basically, now let me rewrite this. So slope, which the first thing I have to do is find the slope. And then it's just a matter of using the second equation, and you're doing kind of the same thing we just did in the last question, but we have to get the slope first. Slope equals y2 minus y1. So my y2 again is 6, right? 6, if you follow that arrow here, goes in place of y2. All right, so 6. Now it's minus y1. Now if you look at my y1 here, my y1, and I'm putting a box around this so you see where I'm pointing, y1 is -2. So y2 minus -2, since we've got double minuses here, right? Minus -2, we just make it a plus. So it really is like saying 6 plus 2. So just remember that trick too. That's kind of a basic math thing, but this question involves a lot of basic math steps. And if you had trouble with some basic math stuff, it's probably going to trip you up, which is unfortunate. You can also do this in your calculator too and just throw it in, but I want to make sure that you see how to do this visually. That's very important. So now we go down to our x's. So what is our x2? x2 is just 1. So in the formula where it says x2, just going to write a 1. Now the next thing is, what is x1? So that's x2. What is x1? So x1 is our -3, right? And so now what I want to do again, it's x2 minus -3. So since it's minus, I just turn it into a plus. Okay, so it becomes 1 plus 3. All right, so what is 6 plus 2? 6 plus 2 is 8. What is 1 plus 3? 1 plus 3 is 4. And what is 8 divided by 4? The correct answer is 2. And so now what we figured out is that slope equals 2. And this is really, really important because we now know that m equals 2. So we take this 2 and we're going to go into equation number 2, which is the point slope form, and we're going to take this 2 and we're going to rewrite this equation and we're going to replace this m with 2. So this is becoming very similar to the last question that we just did. Now the next question you might have is, well, what do I put in place of y1 and what do I put in place of x1? Well, fortunately, we already figured that out here, right? Because remember, the first thing we did was we labeled this pair x1 and y1. So now all I have to do is rewrite this equation, and so let me do that here. I have y minus y1. Now we just look right here, we already labeled y1. And it's going to be another case of minus a minus. It's y minus -2. Minus, we just make that a plus. So it becomes y plus 2 equals m, but we know that m is equal to 2. So I'm going to replace that with a 2. All right, so hopefully you see what I'm doing. I'm taking this equation right here, equation 2, and that's what I'm writing right here. I'm filling out equation 2, and I replaced y1 with the y1 value right here. I replaced m with 2, and now we leave x as it is. So I just write x right here minus x1. So x1 is -3. It would be x minus -3. We've got minus, so I just turn it into a plus. So now what do I do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute this 2. Now you could also, we see it's y plus 2, so you could also subtract 2 first. I just do it this way. I like to distribute the 2 first, but there's multiple ways to do the same thing here. So it's going to be, this will become 2x plus 6. All right, so we would have 2x plus 6. And now what I have to do, since it's y, so I would rewrite this, I would have y plus 2 equals 2x plus 6. And now I'm simply going to get rid of this 2 because I don't want y plus 2, I just want y. So how do you get rid of 2? Well, you have to do the opposite. So it's y plus 2, so I want to subtract 2. The reason I do that is because 2 minus 2 is 0, so the 2's go away. Now I subtract 2 over here on this side of the equation. And I am just going to be left with, when I rewrite this, I have y equals 2x plus 4. Why is it plus 4? It is 2x plus 4 because remember, I had y equals 2x plus 6, and I subtracted 2 from the 6, and that's why I had the 4. And so A is the correct answer here, all right? So this is a complicated question, but this is one of those topics where once people understand how to work through a question like this, a lot of times things start to click into place with GED math, and the other topics start to make more sense too. Not sure why that is, but I've seen it happen several times with students. So if you had trouble with this, maybe rewatch this question, go back, pause it, try to work through all this by yourself, and then if you get stuck, watch the video and try to get yourself unstuck, because this is kind of like a keystone question. If you understand this, I've seen it happen before. It's kind of like once this clicks into place, it kind of helps you get other topics on the GED math section too. So this is an important one to understand. Okay, the next question. What is the slope of a line that is perpendicular to 5x minus 2y equals 1? So I'll give you a chance to pause the video and then you can try it out and then we'll go over it. Okay, so if you had trouble with this question, don't worry, because there's kind of a trick here that you have to understand, and if no one's ever showed you it before, then you're probably not going to be able to get the question right. So this is kind of like either you know it or you don't type of thing, and if you didn't know it, don't worry about it, because right now I'm going to show you what you need to know. So real quick, the difference between parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines look like this, right? They just keep going and going and going, but they never touch. Okay, so these two lines would be parallel. Now perpendicular lines, so this is one line, this is another line. So perpendicular lines cross each other and they form this right angle. All right, this little box type thing is a right angle. So all you need to know, basically, parallel lines, they never touch. Perpendicular lines, they kind of form a cross here. In most cases that you'll see. The next thing you need to understand here, again, the question has the word slope in it. So whenever you hear this word slope, I want you to always think about this. Y equals mx plus b. All right, so that's one of the primary things. This equation here again, y equals mx plus b, this is called the equation of a line. The m is the slope, and we just looked at in the last question how you can actually calculate the slope. It's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But we don't need to do that here, right? The first step is going to be to take this equation and we need to rearrange this equation so that it's in the form of y equals mx plus b. So in other words, we're going to do some math. We're going to rearrange this. We have 5x minus 2y. First move I would do, we want to get just y by itself here. It's 5x minus 2y. I want to subtract 5x from both sides of my equation here, because 5x minus 5x is 0, and whatever you do to one side, you always have to do it to the other. So that would be my first move. So then my second move, it's negative 2y. It's negative 2y. So let me rewrite this so we can visualize it a little bit better here. And this question doesn't require you to use a calculator. If you used a calculator in this question, that's totally fine, but it doesn't require one. And I'll show you how you can determine that in just a second. But basically, negative 5x plus 1. So you could write it as 1 minus 5x, but then it doesn't really help as much because you need it in the form of mx plus b. So instead of writing it as 1 minus 5x, I just flipped it, so it's minus 5x plus 1. We don't want minus 2y, we just want y. So how do I get rid of minus 2? Well, it's minus 2y, meaning minus 2 times y. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I want to divide by negative 2. The reason why, negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. 1 times y is just y. Bingo, I'll have y by itself, but I have to also remember that whatever you do to one side, you always do it to the other. So I have to divide by negative 2 here. Okay, so if you got this far, then you're actually doing really good. This is actually a pretty hard, it's not that hard once you get it, you get it. And I think once you understand it, it'll stick with you. But it's kind of hard. A lot of people have trouble because it's a lot of steps, a lot of basic math. And basically, now what I can do, since we have negative 5x plus 1 all over negative 2, so I can actually rewrite this as negative 5x divided by negative 2 plus 1 over negative 2, okay? And this is just a basic math trick that, hopefully you understand. This is just like a basic skill, and if you've never been really shown this before, it just goes back to basic math, which a lot of these questions, if you're having trouble, there's probably some basic things that we need to teach you so you can pass your test. But basically, negative 5x plus 1 all over negative 2, it's the same thing as negative 5x divided by negative 2 plus 1 over negative 2. And so you just have to kind of know that trick to get this right. And the next thing you have to understand is, what is the slope? Okay, so in this equation, y equals mx plus b, slope is whatever is in front of the x here. So we have y equals negative 5 over 5x divided by negative 2. So the slope is negative 5 over negative 2. And it's, we could actually simplify this. We could, since it's negative 5 over negative 2, we could divide we could take the negative sign. We can cancel that out. And the slope would be 5 over 2x. This is our b, plus, really you could, since it's plus 1 over 2, you could write this as minus 1 over 2, but we don't really care about the b. We don't really actually care about this that much. This minus 1 over 2, it doesn't really help us that much here. We just need to focus on the fact that the slope of the line is 5 over 2. Okay, now here's the trick. It's asking the slope of the line that's perpendicular to this line right here. So what we do now is we take this 5 over 2, we flip it upside down, and we change the sign. Okay, so this is probably really confusing, and this is one of those things that if you're just kind of like really having trouble following this, you might want to study this up on your own a little bit more, or look at some more examples of this, because unfortunately I can't. This is one of those things that might take a couple examples to get, but basically, so the slope of the first line is 5 over 2. And we want to find the slope of the line that is perpendicular to this line. So all you do, simply put, no math jargon, you take the slope, okay, you're going to flip this upside down and put a negative sign in front of it. All right, and that's simply all you do, is you find that it's 5 over 2, flip it upside down, put a negative sign in front of it. All right, so the answer is 2 over 5, but if you're having trouble, please don't go on to the next question. I know it's tempting to kind of want to gun through this and just complete everything that fast, but it's not really the point here, all right, because the point is I want you to understand that the principle is that when two lines are perpendicular, if you know the slope of one of those lines, all right, the slope of the second line, it's going to be the opposite reciprocal, okay? Very confusing way to put it, but again, it goes back to this. These are two perpendicular lines right here, okay? So, I find the slope of one of the lines, let's say the slope of this line, and I want to flip that slope upside down, change the sign in front of it, and that's going to give me the slope of the other line. So basically, we did all this math. We found out the slope of one of the lines was 5 over 2. Now we do the opposite reciprocal. So in other words, that's a fancy way of saying you flip it upside down. So you change it from 5 over 2 to 2 over 5, and you say, hey, it's positive 5 over 2, it becomes negative. You do the opposite reciprocal, perpendicular line, opposite reciprocal. So again, this is unfortunately just one of those things. You might have to look at some more examples if this was confusing for you, but once you get how to do this, you put some time into this, this is actually, you should be able to solve these questions pretty quick once you know how to do it. I know it seems like a lot right now, and I apologize for that. I wish there was an easier way to teach this, but that's what you need to know. All right, so the next question says, Tim is looking at two websites that allow customers to print their own designs on t-shirts. One website charges $24 per t-shirt plus $8 in shipping. The other website uses the equation C equals 22N plus 12 to find the total cost C of printing N t-shirts. What is the difference in the cost of each website if Tim orders 10 t-shirts? So I'll let you pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically here we have two different t-shirts, all right? We have two different websites, I should say, right? And so let me write website 1 to represent the first website. I'm going to call it W1, and I'm going to write W2 to represent the second website. So we've got W1 and W2. And we just have to figure out the cost of ordering from each website, and it says, what is the difference? So we're just going to subtract them. So let's calculate for website 1 first. So it charges $24 per t-shirt plus $8 in shipping. We already know that Tim's ordering 10 t-shirts. And so basically we would do 24, it's 24 per t-shirt, there's 10 t-shirts, so it's 24 times 10 plus 8, right, for the shipping. So we can do this in the calculator. 240 times 10 is going to be 240, plus another 8 is going to be 248. So the total cost of ordering from website 1 is 248. So now let's figure out the cost of website 2. So here we're given an equation, C equals 22N plus 12. They tell us that C is cost and N is says a printing N t-shirts. So if you don't know what the number of t-shirts is, you would just write a variable, you would just put N in its place. Since we do know the number of t-shirts though, we know that it's 10, so instead of this N, we're gonna plug 10 in here. So basically, to figure out the cost of the second website, we would do 22 times 10, right? Because N represents the number of t-shirts. We know that he's ordering 10 t-shirts, so we replace it with 10, and we add 12. So 22 times 10 is 222, or I'm sorry, 220, not 222, 220. And we're adding 12 to it. So let's see. See, this is how I get in trouble when I don't use my calculator and I make minor math errors, but I'm going to do it anyway. This would become 32. So this should be 232. And so we've got the cost is 248 and 232. Sometimes in videos when I just decide to do basic math off the top of my head while I'm trying to teach a video, I make minor math errors and then I leave it in the video because I don't catch it, but I'm not gonna learn from my mistakes. I'm just gonna do that here anyway. 8 minus 2 is 6. 4 minus 3 is 1. I get 16 is the answer here. Yeah, that should be right. B is the correct answer here. So hopefully I made it through with that, a basic math mistake that I make sometimes when I'm trying to do too many things at once. But basically, again, we calculate the cost of one, calculate the cost of ordering from the second website, we subtract them. The difference between them is 16 bucks. B is the right answer here. Okay, the next question says, which table represents a function? A, B, C, or D? So I'd like you to pause the video, try this out, and then as always, we'll go over it. Okay, so basically here what we need to know is that the main trick behind this is that for a function, there's only going to be one input. For every input, there can only be one output. All right, the x's are the inputs, the y's are the outputs. So if this is really confusing for you, don't worry about it. Let me explain this. So here is my make-believe soda machine. And let's call this the function soda machine, right? And basically, I know this is silly, but it's going to help you remember it. So let's imagine that like these are the buttons on the soda machine, right? And so let's say this is a Pepsi, right? So let's say, you know, for a Pepsi, let's say in this soda machine, a Pepsi costs $3. And obviously that's pretty expensive, but we're just playing pretend right now. Let's say that this is, you know, a Coke costs $2, and let's say this is like a vitamin water, and let's say vitamin water is miraculously only $1. And I promise this is going somewhere. I'm not just drawing this out just so that you can see my lack of drawing skills here. And this is, you know, let's see, you put your dollar in up here, and these are the buttons you push. This for a Pepsi, this for a Coke, this for vitamin water, and here's where your drink comes out. And basically what I want you to see about this imaginary function soda machine is that you can't put in $3 and get a Coke, all right? You can't put in $1 and get a Pepsi, all right? If you put in $1, you can only get a vitamin water. You can't put in $1 and get a Coke or a Pepsi. So every input, the money that you're putting into the machine, that is the input, all right? You can only get one output, all right? You can't put in $2 and get a Pepsi. You can only, if you put $2 in, you can only get a Coke. And that's kind of the same idea here, only the X's are your inputs here. So right off the bat, I can tell A is not right because look, so this is kind of like, look at the 0 here, right? 0 has an output of -4, and then here 0 has an output of 4. That can't be because you can only get one, for every input, you can only get one output. Same with this, all right? For 2, look how here, you input 2, it's trying to tell you that you can get -3, and if you input 2, you can also get a 3. No, that's wrong. A is out because for each input, you can only have exactly one output. Again, if you put $2 into the imaginary soda machine here, you can only get a Coke. All right, so that's like here, they're trying to tell you that if you put $2 into the function, you can get -3 or you could get +3, and that's not the case here. All right, so let's look down here also at B. I can tell B is wrong because here, it's look, what they're trying to tell us is that we can put 5 in and get -1, or we could put a 5 in and get 3. That is not a function because remember, for a function, each input can only have one output. All right, so again, back to the soda machine example here, right? In this imaginary soda machine, there's only 3 drinks. Each cost has a specific cost to it. You can't put in $1 and get a Pepsi. If you put $1 in, the only thing you can get is a vitamin water. You can't put in $1 and get a Coke and a Pepsi. That's what they're trying to tell us here, right? If you put a 5 in, they're trying to tell us you put 5 in, you can get -1, or you put 5 in, you could get 3. That's not a function. There can only be one. For each input, there can only be one output. Same with D. I can already tell D is wrong because look, we've got an input of -2, output of 1, input of -2, output of -3. That can't be. All right, so for D to be true, every single time you put -2 into the function as an input, you'd have to get a 1. All right, if you put -2 in and you get 1 or you get -3, all right, that is not a function here. Now, what about C here? Well, C, you put in -5, you get out -4. You put in -4, you get out -4. That is okay. You can have the same outputs, but the point is it has to be for each input, there has to be a unique output. So that'd be kind of like here, imagine if for some reason a Pepsi, you could put in $4 and get a Pepsi, or you could put in $3 and get a Pepsi. All right, so it's perfectly okay the output would be the Pepsi, the input would be you put $3 in, you can get a Pepsi as the output. You put $4 in, you can also get a Pepsi as an output. All right, but the point is if you put $4 in every time you're going to get a Pepsi. You put $3 in every time you're going to get a Pepsi. You can't put $4 in and one time it gives you a Pepsi, put $4 in and then the next time you get a Coke. No. It can be the same output, but it can only be one input. So again, you put in -5, every single time the output's going to be -4. You put in -4, every single time the output's going to be -4. All right, it doesn't matter that the outputs are the same. That's perfectly fine. It's just for each input, you can only have one output. Again, -3, -2, okay? 0, -1. So C checks out here as a function. I just hope it's clear here that, the problem, again, if we go back to D, A, B, any of these examples, you have 5 as an input, output of -1, 5 as an input, also 3. That can't be a function. Again, if the input is 5 and you get a -1, for this to be a function, every single time you put in a 5, you'd have to get a -1. All right, you can't get a -5, a -1 one time and a 3 another time. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully this imaginary function soda machine didn't confuse you much further. Okay, the next question. What is the value of function of x equals 3x squared plus 4 when x equals -3? So I'd like you to pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically, since they're telling us that x equals -3, we're going to take -3 and plug it into the equation for x. Now, if you're not sure what I mean when I say plug it into the equation, I just mean instead of the x, we're going to rewrite it with a -3 in place of the x. So I'm rewriting it right now, and when I rewrite it, it's going to look like 3 times -3 squared plus 4. So now, what do I do next? Because we have a couple different paths here. Do I want to try to do 3 times something, or do I want to try to add 4? Or do I want to deal with the parentheses and the exponents? Well, the answer is I want to deal with the -3 squared first, right? Because in the order of operations rules, we have, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and I'm not going to rehash a whole lesson on this right now because we've talked about it before in other videos and in other places, but basically just quick as a refresher, repetition's always good. You want to start with what's in the parentheses and exponents before you go on to multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And I know I'm going over that kind of fast because I've talked about it in other places, but basically we want to start with this -3 squared, and we want to deal with that first. So -3 squared is the same as -3 times -3, which is +9. So anytime you square a negative number, the answer is going to be positive. So we deal with the parentheses and exponents, and we rewrite it as 3 times 9 plus 4. Hopefully you're able to follow this so far. And now what we want to do is, if you're wondering what do I do next? Do I do 3 times 9 next, or do I try to add 4? You just have to look up at your order of operations rules. We did parentheses and exponents, so next we look for any multiplication, which we have here, 3 times 9. So I want to do that next. 3 times 9 is 27, and we're left with 27 plus 4. We don't have any division, so we skip the D, which we get to A, which is addition. 27 plus 4 is 31. We don't have any subtraction, so we're done, and C is the correct answer.